Now you guys can hear us. What's going on? It's Frederick and Gene Watts. It's 11:60. Thank you guys for signing in this evening as we're
Oh, sorry, my
waiting
bad.
for us to join, for
Woo!
people to join. We appreciate you. We won't be long tonight. We're gonna hit a good topic, talk about some things. Hopefully, you guys will enjoy it. As always, we appreciate you guys signing in. Appreciate you guys tuning in and following us on Facebook and Instagram. Shout out to our winners last week of our Cash App giveaway.
Yeah.
Appreciate our followers.
Yep.
So tonight we're gonna just talk about managing conflict in relationships.
Yeah. That's a big one. Managing conflict. Whenever you are in a relationship, and not just your marital relationship, whatever you are in any relationship, you are going to have conflict. Whether it's a relationship with your kindergartner or it's a relationship with your husband or wife, you're definitely going to, just really have a scenario or a situation at some point that you're going to be able to I don't see what that say. Okay.
We're just messing around. We're trying new stuff. Sorry
Okay,
about
but anyways, you're gonna have a situation where you are you're gonna have to manage some type of conflict.
Right.
So with those things being said,
Right.
we're gonna get into it tonight.
And so, one part of a relationship that's unfortunately inevitable sometimes is you will have conflicts, and like you said, in all relationships.
Absolutely.
But tonight we're going to talk about, especially in marriage, those things arise, and basically how you deal with them, how you cope with them, and then understanding what it is,
Yes.
and how to avoid and make those changes. That's what's important.
Yes, absolutely.
And so hopefully we can share some strategies that'll help you, and maybe even give you some good conflict resolution.
Yes.
When dealing in relationships.
Yes.
So,
Yes, sir.
so
Yeah.
let's talk.
Let's
about
get in it.
Yeah. What do you want to hit first?
Well, you got the floor, so you go ahead and get started.
So a lot of times when you're dealing with conflict, you just want to know, basically, what is it? Basically, what is causing it? Especially if
Yes.
you're having stuff that's happening over and over.
Yeah.
If you're married and you're arguing about money all the time, or arguing about the children, or arguing about time that you need with each other, or anything, and it's happening over and over again, you're creating conflict.
Absolutely. And not necessarily that you are creating the conflict.
yeah,
You're experiencing conflict, and I can't see myself, so I feel weird. But anyways, you are experiencing conflict. If you're bumping heads, if you are not seeming like you're coming eye to eye, you're not on the same level. Every time you're saying something, you are not feeling heard. The other person is not feeling heard, and you just got this. My first lady used to say, "There's a cat on the line somewhere." If there's a cat on the line, you gotta address that issue. You gotta address that conflict. You gotta address that abrasiveness and that aggression, because if you don't, it is going to turn into something that is going to be very difficult to deal with down the line.
Right. And one thing that we have seen in coaching and helping people in marriages is that it's usually like they call it a dance, when you are just always going back round and round, or even when you talk about, you've heard the thing, hurt people.
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with conflict and you're not being able to resolve it, it's usually because you're dancing around either the issue or your feelings or emotions, and you get in a cycle where you can never get out of the conflict, or even if you solve it for a day because maybe the root wasn't resolved, then you come back to that same conflict some point down the line.
Absolutely. Conflict in relationships are inevitable. They're going to be there. They're going to happen. You're going to have, you're not going to agree about everything. And as much as I love you, we do not agree on everything. And even before he's like telling me, will you hurry up because you are not getting yourself together? And I'm like, yes, I am. I'm getting myself together. I'm doing what and even though there's mild conflict, he, wishes I had a little bit better time management in his opinion. It's mild conflict, but it's something that should be respected and addressed, because every relationship is going to have some degree of it. And being able to manage that is going to help you have a healthy and happy relationship. And again, it could be with your mama, it could be with your sister, your brother, your church leaders, your department head, your supervisor. It's going to be pretty much in any point of our lives, we can experience that that conflict, and knowing how to manage that conflict, and knowing how to, like the Bible says, a soft answer turns away wrath. Knowing how to have a soft answer, and knowing how to kind of just holding your peace, knowing how to kind of be quiet when it's time to be quiet, and to speak when it's time to speak. The Bible also says there's a time for everything under the sun.
Right, that's good, and it's just important, especially when you understand, when we're talking about marriage, what triggers certain things. Like, we talked about what men equate love with and what women equate love with sometimes, and even in conflict, there's certain triggers that'll get you started, that'll get you over, and it doesn't really, it's not necessarily men or women, but giving an example, if a man feels like he is failing at a certain task, or failing in the relationship, or has made a mistake, or maybe be treated unfair sometimes, and if he feels that way, then there's going to be a reaction, because, like was Newton's law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so he may react in a way that where he'll defend, I've done this, or try to fix something, and then not fixing it right, maybe not using biblical principles to fix certain conflicts, or maybe try to rationalize. Or one thing that men do a lot is trying to minimize their reaction to their, how they felt. What are some things that women or some things that may be some triggers for women?
Well, I think some triggers for women, as far as a conflict is concerned, it's that feeling of not being loved, not being cherished, not being valued, not being respected. And so if you have those types of feelings, those type of emotions, those type of things happening, and that's not just for women, but I think that's for anybody. Not being heard, and not what you're saying or what you're speaking is not being valued. Now, that's another thing, is feeling like what you're saying is not being obeyed. You know what I mean? Because sometimes, that's not a situation where it should be like, well, you should obey. And I know that the some of the vows say love, honor, and obey. But we should love, honor, and cherish, and love, honor, and respect. Unless you're a child, I don't think that it necessarily means that you should necessarily obey, but I think that you should honor and respect it, and ultimately that may be obedience, but or doing what somebody says. But if a person doesn't feel heard, they don't feel valued, if a woman doesn't feel cherished or loved, that can really certainly cause conflict.
And especially another one is they don't feel protected.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, basically, how do you manage? How do you not push those buttons? So we're arguing, you're getting on my nerves, I'm getting on your nerves, so do I go high or do I go low? If you go low all the times and say things to your spouse that causes them to push those emotional buttons, then you're not managing conflict well, because you're basically creating an atmosphere where all the things that they desire is being pushed out the window.
And the things that we're talking about right now tonight are kind of the precursors to arguments, the precursors to real serious conflict. These are the pre-boxing match. You know what I'm saying? This is when you're just taking a jab. This is when you didn't get into the real, uppercuts and all this stuff. You got a jab. You just took one jab and then you step back and you bobbing and weaving. You jab again. You know what I'm saying? So we're talking about that part before you really get into the thick of the fight. But if you can manage this part, and you can fight unfairly, because fighting fair is sometimes is a hit for a hit.
Yeah, that's good.
You know what I'm saying? But if you're fighting unfairly, that means, and not fighting unfairly in a negative way, but fighting unfairly in a positive way. Do not give back what a person may deserve. Right. If they say a very evil comment, or if they do something that's not, you can't render evil for evil. But the Bible says, and it is really profound, because the more I'm talking about it, the more I feel, even the presence of God speaking. You have to render good for evil. Yeah. To be above, to be the type of person, or to have the type of integrity or godliness that God would want you to have, is you reward evil with good. Right. Or respond with it. That's not necessarily reward it, but you respond to it with good, because that is what God has commanded. You know what I'm saying? It's like the turn the other cheek, and you be like, how many cheeks do I got? Because after this, your cheek is gonna get dotted. Your eyes gonna get dotted.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's unrealistic to think that it's always going to happen.
No.
Because that's just a part of life, But what is the saving point is that when you realize it, or that when you love somebody or that you care, you don't want to stay in conflict all the time.
No.
You want to resolve it. You want to get out of it. So being able to understand how to minimize it, to bring it down when you get there is helpful. And it's very important to be able to have those tools in a relationship, and especially in a marriage. You have to be able to, love your spouse, honor your spouse.
Yeah.
To a point to that where you have a disagreement, it's not turning into something that's going to cause you to flight or cause you to fight.
Yeah, fight or flight is always the two go-to options, and neither one of them are really good options when you're dealing with that conflict and that fear dance, because either you're gonna fight with each other, or you're gonna leave and one person's not gonna talk. They're not gonna. You gotta always stay in engagement and conversation. You got to always talk it through. You got to always remember that we need to communicate. And that doesn't mean having long drawn out conversation, because sometimes people don't want to have no long drawn out conversation. But you got to have some conversation, and you got to be able to communicate your feelings with clarity. Use your words, like they tell you in Kenny. Use your words to determine how it is that you're feeling. You got to use your words and say, you know what, and you got to say it in this manner. Okay, when you for example, I don't know, when you eat the last piece of cake without leaving, and I'm just saying something, last piece of cake without, leaving me any, and it was my cake, that makes me feel like you don't really care that I enjoy a piece of cake too.
Right.
And it makes me feel unvalued. It makes me feel unloved, because you just feel like, you make me feel like you want everything for yourself.
Right.
And you could say, well, how could you say that?
That would be if I wanted to fight, I'd be like, you don't need no cake anyways.
No,
you don't need no cake, whatever. That's belittling.
Yeah.
Or, that's one way. Or if I flight, I could be like, okay, I'm sorry. Or, or just, or whatever. Won't do it again.
Okay.
Just
and you still
withdraw.
Will do it again. Yeah. And don't,
or just, anything like that. And so you don't want to be able to do that. What you do is, definitely come and be like, okay, that was my cake that you bought me, maybe, let's say, but because I love you, oh man, I didn't even think about that. I didn't think about your feelings. I was being a little selfish. I apologize. Or that wasn't my intent. I might have thought that you had your piece already and I didn't know you liked the cake. Whatever. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you are getting to that point, because in the end, you're a partnership.
Absolutely.
And what is important to do, like when you, especially, I think we talked to this a little bit last week, is like calling your spouse and speaking to your spouse biblically and as who they are.
Sure.
If you are in conflict, you're fighting or whatever, and you start calling them names, you start calling them out their names, you're actually putting that in the atmosphere, especially as believers, to saying what you're speaking something over them that they're not. And so you have to be able to understand in conflict and fighting and when you have arguments or disagreements, that you're communicating, but you're not speaking negatively about your spouse. Because if you keep saying those things, oh, they're stupid, they're dumb, they're not smart, you're not faithful, you're ugly, whatever it is, you're gonna put that in the atmosphere, and it's gonna get in their spirit, and then eventually it's gonna be in your spirit, and have a mindset of that they are stupid when they're not. And then every time you deal with them in any kind of conflict, you're thinking that they are what you've said.
Absolutely. And that is a huge thing. What you really want to make sure that you're doing, and if I could give any couple that's just starting out or getting ready to start out, or you've never been in a relationship or want to be in a relationship with somebody, or whatever the case is, do not cross that line of calling your spouse out of their name. I don't care how angry you are. I don't care how much they hurt you. Do not cross that line of calling them out of their name, because if you cross that line of calling them out of their name, it's a line of disrespect that it's really hard to come back from. So if you say, this chick is, or, and to anyone else, but especially not to each other. not to each other's face. Now you'll be like, this chump is acting like a fool, you know. You may say that to your brother or your sister, whatever, blah blah blah, but you do not cross that line and say, you know, you are the lowest, you are the scum of the earth, or you stupid, or you are a rotten liar. Even if they are a rotten liar,
Right.
even if they are, you do not pronounce that over your spouse. If you pronounce anything, let it be positive. It may be the absolute opposite of how they're acting. But if you tell somebody, even a child, if you tell a child, you know what, you are so awesome. You are so awesome. Now, I know what you did was a mistake. And I know what you did was probably not your best behavior, but you are super awesome. And I know who you are. I know who you are. When I tell you, the majority of the time, people will rise to the occasion of whatever it is that you're calling them.
Right.
So if you're calling them something blessed, they're going to rise to the occasion. But if you're calling them something rotten, they're going to rise to that occasion. Yeah. And they're going to live up to it. And then it's hard to go back and be loving and gentle and tender and restored to a person that you have belittled.
Right.
And that you have beat over the head. That's why verbal abuse, like in my opinion, is almost as bad as physical abuse. Because it's an emotional just weight that you put on a person, a cap that you put on a person that's really, really difficult to get out of. So if I can give you any advice, if you don't remember nothing else that we say for this entire segment that we're doing tonight, do not call your spouse ever, no matter how angry you are, out of their name. Right.
No, that's good, because all that does is provoke reactions.
Yeah.
And anytime that you're in a reactive stage, you're emotionally reactive is negative. It's going to make things work.
Yep.
Because you're in your emotions, you're in your feelings.
Yep.
And even if it's justified, and it's going to happen.
Yep.
It's going to happen. It's just part of life. But what you want to make sure that you're doing is that when you recognize it, you bring it back. You know, bring it back. We talk about fences every single week. One fence is, even in conflict, is using the word of God. You know, and understanding what your spouse is to you, how much you love them, how much you care for them, how much they're important. When you see them in that light, you're able to not be in a reactive state, but you're able to be in a state that God has intended for you to be as a spouse, loving, caring, and protected.
Absolutely. And to interject there as well, it is okay to pray what you believe or what you want to see your spouse or whoever that loved one is. Not just your spouse, could be, you know, whoever in your relationship, your sister, your brother, like I said, mother, father, whatever, to pray that what you want to see that person as. Father, I thank you that my son is so amazing, that my son does, extremely well in school. I thank you that my daughter listens, that she values herself, she values her body, she values your word in her life. I thank you because my mother is, loves you and she follows after you with her whole heart. I thank you that my spouse is tenderhearted, that my spouse is caring, that my spouse is loving, my spouse is kind to me and to our children. I thank you for that. Even if that's not the case right now, that is what you pronounce and that is what you speak. The Bible says your words have life. They have spirit and they are life, and that your words define your world. And that's not just the Bible, but it's everybody's positive speak. Let's put it in the atmosphere. People saying all of these things because what you say is because that your words frame your world. Yeah.
And let's go. Keeping in relationships as far as marriage, let's talk about family. Very important to watch how you speak to your children.
Yes.
And what you call your children. Never call your children stupid. Never call them out their names, especially in anger, And even sometimes, some of the nicknames that you give them, like little man or, it's okay, but, you're really shaping their future. And it's very important. I learned this. I'll share something, is that when my kids were little and started to grow, or little 9, 10 or whatever, sometimes if the patience got tested, I would yell. And then God convicted me on that. It's like, you got to speak kindly and softly. Sternly, being kind as a father, as a parent, is not weakness.
Right.
But what happened when I started to reprimand kindly, they received it.
Yeah.
They corrected even more so
They
than
did.
when I yelled.
Yep.
And especially as you transition to when they get to be teenagers and they hit that stupid button. Now I said don't call them stupid, but they got a stupid button.
Yeah.
Meaning, you know, because they're gonna get there. If you are one that if you're constantly, you know, butting heads or whatever, then a lot of times you have to react in a different way. You have
Sure.
to make a different approach. You know, most of the time yelling all the time to
Yeah.
resolve conflict
They're not
just
gonna hear
doesn't
it.
work.
Not gonna
Doesn't
hear
work.
it.
And you are also establishing how they're going to relate to others, how
Yes.
they're going to relate to maybe you later as a parent, or how they're going to relate to their spouses and their children. And so it's very important that as you're growing and as you're raising children, not to constantly, you know, yell all the time. And granted, there's 90% of the time
Yes, your
that
children
they
will
need
make you want to cuss.
all of that. But you know, managing conflict even in that area.
Yes.
You know, being able to love them and discern, but also reprimand without always conflict, because what'll happen is that they're going to react.
Absolutely.
And the way they react is going to shape how well or how bad the situation will get.
I mean, and just to add to what you said, the way that if somebody's yelling at you, you're not listening to what they're saying. You're thinking on how you're going to respond, whether you're going to fight or flight, whether you're going to shut down or whether you're not going to say nothing, because a kid will do one or the other too. And your spouse will do one or the other. Am I going to respond back and yell back or whatever? But you processing and thinking while this person is yelling at you, processing what you're going to say.
Right.
You're going to process how you're going to get them back, how you're going to dig back, how you're going to punch back, how you're going to fight back.
Right.
And you're not processing what's being said.
Right.
That's not communication. If you respond and you answer, then that person, first of all, does not feel rejected, because if you're constantly going like this and they're static, then you know the other person is going to feel rejected. They're going to feel that you're rejecting what they're saying. They're going to feel you know, they're going to feel not wanted. They're not going to feel not needed. They're going to feel all of those things not valued. And you want to make sure that you are the person making your spouse feel valued.
Right. Somebody had put a question up there, a comment. So when you're angry, you know, how do you manage your anger? You know, especially towards your spouse. I mean, you're going to get angry when things happen, but the Bible says, you know, to be angry and sin not. You know, not to sin. And so let's put sin as relationship, not to make your spouse. You can be angry at them, but don't cause it to have a reaction to where you're having a conflict, to where you have now belittled them.
Right.
To where you now have hurt their feelings, to where they can't communicate. Because the reason you're angry is because of a failure of communication.
Yes.
So because they didn't pay a bill, they weren't good with money, they made a mistake, you know, up to something even more serious where trust was broken, or, you know, a broken heart, tender heart. Matters of the heart are very important.
Yeah.
But you want to be able to be angry, and you can get angry but not sin.
Absolutely.
And when we're talking about that, to not belittle your spouse, because if you do that, then you're not going to be able to communicate the problem, and you're going to start that dance where where you're going around, where they say something, you say something, or they fight with you, or they flight with you, that you don't get the problem resolved because they've stepped away, they've stepped out, they backed out. Some people don't like conflict, so they'll just say, hey, whatever.
Yep.
You know, but the root of it is that they still spend the money. They're still watching
still having
TV
that same behavior
at night, still having the same behavior. So you're going to have to be able to, you know, it's okay to be angry, but don't hold on to that anger. Don't let that anger affect the way you communicate.
Yeah, and like I believe it is a scripture in the Bible, but if it's not, it's still a good saying. But it says, "Don't let the sun go down on your wrath."
Right.
So don't be angry. And the way that you have to manage it, and people manage it different ways. I'll give you an example of the way that I manage anger. Sometimes I take a lot before I get really full. And then a lot of times people like that do that and they pop off. Sometimes I can be that person, but I try to take a step back from the situation and say, you know what? Let's not talk about this right now. Let's give ourselves a second, and then I'm gonna come back, and and then, you know, and then we're gonna have to deal with it. And then at that particular point, either I'll go and I'll write down, or I'll make some notes in my phone or whatever of what I need to say, what I'm feeling at that moment, what that person is trying to convey to me, what I feel like they may be trying to convey to me. And then I come back at another time and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm feeling. Or I'll write or send a letter or a text to them saying, hey, can we talk? That kind of way. You have to manage your anger in different ways. If you need a moment, you request a moment. Don't just shut down.
Right.
Just say, hey, you know what? We are going to talk about this. We are going to deal with this. Just let me have a moment, and then I'm going to deal with it. Now, you may have to have a mediator. You may have to have somebody that has to come in, a go between if it's too serious of a situation. You may have a person that you can both discuss the situation, somebody that you trust, discuss that situation if it's to that level. You can do that, but there's a lot of things that come along with feelings that come as a result of that conflict.
Right. And then you have to be honest with yourself, because if you are a person, when you're in that thing and you know that if I say this, it's going to get this reaction from that person, you have to be the bigger person and not be able to want to go there, because if you want to go there, then you're now not wanting to resolve the conflict.
Right.
Another example that has worked, good for our relationship. We've been married 20 plus years. Definitely love to hear from some of you who have been married even longer or even less. Some things that work to us, especially for us, when we talk about anger, when I got angry with my wife for something that we've done or whatever it is,
never done nothing.
Right? No, she is perfect in all her ways. But my thing was that even if I'm still angry and the conflict has not been resolved, I'm not going to sleep on the couch.
Right.
I'm not going to go in another room all night.
Right.
I may step out for a minute, like you said, catch your breath. We're going to go to sleep together, and we're going to get up. And what has worked for us is by the time we've slept on it, even together, and even if it was something to where I don't want to touch you in the bed, or whatever, put my foot on, or you don't want to have my touch back. By the time, because we made that commitment not to do that, in the morning, whatever it wasn't as bad as what it was when we went to sleep. So you have to have some type of fence or some type of boundaries in your marriage, in your relationship. You're going to say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to let this sun go down on my wrath, because if I could just make it through the night, the Bible's so practical, that in the morning it's gonna be all right.
Yep, it will be better. But again, it's some situations are super serious, and they're you want to be careful that your conflict doesn't leave your spouse feeling a certain way, because if that's consistent over time and over years, that will build, and it can really destroy your relationship, and you'll feel blindsided because you didn't really know that this was coming, but you were building that.
Right.
You were building that distrust. You were building that sever. You were building that place where you were gonna that fissure. A fissure, like it's when in a bridge. A fissure is a very small crack.
Okay.
It can be a big, huge bridge, but a fissure is a very small break in that bridge, and you can have a cat walk across that big bridge and touch that fissure, and it can destroy the whole bridge. So you're making a fissure by allowing conflict to just build and build and not really resolving it. But you should, the Bible says, come now, let us reason together.
Right, yeah.
So let us reason together, even if you feel like your spouse is just like, that is so extra, and I'm great, and they're stupid. You're not as great as you think you are.
Right.
You're not as great as you think you are. So humble yourself. Humble yourself, because like with my husband, even like he said, things that he may have been angry with me about, or vice versa. I have learned, and it took me time to learn, even if I felt like I didn't do anything, what is my part in the offense? Right. What is my part in the problem? Right. And, should I be more whatever? Right. Not blaming myself for problems, but allowing myself to take responsibility for being the solution.
And let me interject something like that. When you have conflict and it's not resolved, is because you have become adversaries. And the reason you became adversaries is because of your reaction to whatever it is. And when you do what you say and you do it like that, when you say, well, wait a minute, what is my issue in this argument? What did I do or did not do? What do I see? The way to manage conflict in any relationship is not to be an adversary.
Yeah.
So, and once you are not an adversary, then you're able to advise and analyze the situation. And then when you're able to do that, then you can communicate properly to resolve it. But as long as you become an adversary, you're going to get a reaction from the other adversary.
Absolutely.
And you're going to keep going around and around and around. And that's the dance.
Yeah. And it's, you're on the same team. You got to remember that you're on the same team. You're in a common goal. This you building your stuff. This you building your stuff together. This is us. Like the name of the show. This is us. So this relationship, this is us. This is our stuff. This is what we're building. We team Watts. You team whomever. Team whomever. You have to know that is who God made you, and that you, whether God just handpicked that person for you or you just made selection of that person, that is where you are. Right. You know what I'm saying? So live with and love the choice that you made. I want to talk a little bit about what as a result of the conflict, how people can say that they feel, and we can kind of alternate these because we have some of these written down, and kind of what psychologically these types of feelings make people feel. So like, for example, as a result of the conflict, I felt rejected. And so rejected, my spouse doesn't want me. My spouse doesn't need me. I am not necessary to this relationship. And my spouse does not desire me. And I feel unwanted. Because of the conflict, because you're having a situation, you're having a disagreement, the way that your spouse responds to you, your spouse can feel rejected if you are not responding properly. So that's one of the things.
Yeah, and rejection is going, if you don't correct that, then you'll be dancing in this conflict. So you definitely wanted to, make sure that you are not making them feel, and even when you said abandoned, you don't want to make sure that
that's one of the second things
about being alone. You don't want them to feel like, well, because we keep having this conflict, or because we keep having this, that you're going to eventually leave me, that you're not committed to it, that you're not in it for the long haul. And when you're dealing with your spouse, you always have to make them feel that that you are not alone, and that even though we're arguing, even though we beefing, you still my team. You
stuck with me.
Yeah, you stuck with me. I'm stuck with you. Divorce is not an option.
Absolutely, you got to take it off the table.
You have to take it off the table, and we're talking about general conflicts, which, and even from what you think is a minor offense to what you classify as a worse offense ever. There are techniques and ways to handle these things, to manage conflict, and then before you have to bring in other options. Absolutely.
So you don't want your spouse to feel rejected, you don't want them to feel abandoned, but you don't want to feel them to feel disconnected. It says so. This conflict made me feel like we will become emotionally detached or separated. You do not want to shut your spouse off in a way, or cut them off, or disregard their feelings in a way where they feel disconnected, because some people, that's not going to work for them. They'll be like, okay, well, this thing is over because I can't, I got married to be in a partnership and a loving relationship. I'm not feeling the love. I feel disconnected. I'm gone.
True. And another one is that, especially sometimes, or mostly men feel this way, like a failure. If you make them feel like they aren't successful, like if you don't say, man, wife, you make the best eggs, you make the best, or
even, and I don't want to interrupt you, but even if you're not telling them that you're a great wife, you're a great husband, you are a great husband. I don't know anybody else, and I can say that I don't know anybody else in the world that's a better husband than you are.
Yeah. And that should be
true.
And
I'm telling you that right now.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know anybody else that's a better husband. I've never had. You're the best husband, best husband I've ever had. But
you're the best wife I ever had.
Yeah.
Because that's just basically, nobody wants to feel like a failure.
Right.
And then if they feel like a failure, they're probably going to react in one of their ways that will cause them to not want to resolve the conflict. And if you created that atmosphere, then you have to make sure that you're doing something to change that.
Right. You don't want a person to feel like, okay, I can't do this right. I can't live up to your expectations. Right. I fall short in my relationship and I'm not good enough. You don't want to make a person feel, or your spouse, let's just be specific. You don't want to make your spouse feel like they're not good enough, because you make them feel like they're not good enough. You be no, you don't never do this, or you don't never take care to help me take care of the kids. The kids are always dirty. The house is always dirty. You don't never do nothing. You compliment. And I'm gonna interject this story here because we're gonna continue because we got a few more of these written down. But Miles Monroe, which was a great marital teacher, and if you have the opportunity, just kind of look up some of his things on YouTube. He's gone on to be with the Lord, but he used to teach some dynamic relationship series, and he taught about this one lady. He in his teaching, he talked about this one lady from his church, and she said she would come come home, and her husband would come home. He'd be out all night, out late at night, or stay out all night. He'd be out drinking, just doing whatever he wanted to do. And then sometimes nights he wouldn't even come home. So he said to her, what do you do when he comes home? She was like, well, I asked him where he's been and blah, 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 all of these kind of things. He said, let me tell you what else to do. He said, don't ever ask him anything else. Don't ask him nothing negative. Don't talk about him. Don't say where you been, why you out all night. He said, thank him for coming home. Whenever he comes home, just thank him for coming. And she was like, are you kidding me? And he was like, nope. He was like, that's what I want you to do. That's what the Holy Spirit told me to tell you to do. And so this woman began to thank her husband. He used to be out at the clubs and out with, fooling around and all kinds of stuff. But whenever he would come home, she'd be like, oh, honey, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for coming home. I'm so glad that you're here. That man went from being out in the streets, he said, to being one of his best and strongest deacons in his church, and an amazing husband, because she didn't address all of the negative things they did. She addressed whatever positive that they gave him.
And she started sowing into him so that he could grow.
And speaking growth, yes.
And it's hard. I mean, just like,
it is. You want to slap him down.
When you plant, if you're a farmer and you plant corn, you out there tilling the land, planting corn seed, whatever it is, just because you plant it in the ground, it don't grow as soon as you put the seed in.
It does not.
It takes a while. It takes
a lot of water.
It takes watering. It takes tilling the ground, takes the sunshine, it takes all those things to make that seed grow. And then a lot of times you have to push that seed deep down into the ground, so you have to make sure that you are sowing, and sometimes in relationships that's hard, but there is a result. There's a good thing that comes from it when you continue to sow. God will honor his word.
Absolutely.
Every single time.
Absolutely. So don't address the failures as often as you address the positive things and the successes. Right. is our point. And now also, you don't want that person to feel helpless or powerless. I cannot do anything to change my spouse or my situation. I am not I don't possess the power, the resources, the capacity, or the ability to get what I want, and I am controlled by my spouse. You do not want your spouse feeling like they're in a controlled relationship, and you don't want to be trying to feel like you can, who wants that? You know what I'm saying? But sometimes people want, or they're used to being in control of a situation. They're used to everything going the way that they say it should go. Sometimes you have to relinquish that control because you don't have the power to change people, but God does. You have no power to change anybody. You don't even have power to change your kid, really. Right. You can teach your kid and you can share with your child, but you don't have no power to change them. It takes God to do the changing on the inside, and that's a work for the potter and for the clay. Right. And your hand is not a part of the clay. Yeah, sorry, true. Charlie. So yeah.
Man, we're gonna wrap it up, but okay. Also, one thing that you want, if your partner says, or your spouse says, "Oh, I feel inadequate. I feel that I'm not capable of living up to your expectations. I feel incompetent." That's something that will, if you don't manage that, or if you're creating a conflict or an environment where you feel like that, then you have to address it. You have to make sure that they feel adequate, that you are building upon them, that they don't feel inferior.
Right.
Because it's a partnership. Like we always say, I don't believe marriage is 50-50. I believe marriage is 100 for both people.
Yep.
And sometimes when we say 100, and I've heard you say, is that because that your partner, your spouse may only be giving 30,
Right,
or
10
zero,
or 0.
and you have to always give the 100 because that's who you are. And a lot of times before you get married, if you were only 50, you're not going to be able to go into a partnership, into a marriage with somebody that's 30. You know, you have to make sure that you are both living up to
Giving
your
all.
best, giving all that you be, and it's hard work. But when you give 100, and even if you don't get 100, God is going to give you everything that you need.
Because God's math is not like ours.
Yeah, it's not.
So if we're giving 100, that equals 10,000. Because one can put 1,000 to flight, but two can put 10,000 to flight.
Isn't the
So
Bible great?
God's math is not like our math. His math is exponential. So you want to make sure that you continue to do that. You don't want to make a person feel defective, like something is wrong with them, and they're the problem. You don't want your spouse to feel like that, even though. Well, I should say that you shouldn't want your spouse to feel like that. Some people do. They feel like they want to be the person that's good. I'm right in this relationship. You're a dummy.
Right.
You know, you need to get your act together. Right. How about you get your act together? Everybody both people get their act together, because I promise you there's two sides to every story all the time.
Yeah.
Now that, sometimes certain, people make mistakes, or they step outside of the boundaries that God has set for them. Within life and relationships and love and marriage, for many different reasons. It could be infidelity, it could be just lying, it could be spending the money, it could be making bad decisions. But God allows us to stay within that framework, we'll stay within that fence if we will be obedient. But we don't want to be self-righteous in that. So the last thing is we don't want a person to feel like they're invalidated. Who I am, what I think, what I do, or how I feel is not valued. And we talked about that earlier. You do not want your spouse to feel unvalued, because if they don't feel valued, then that value is a break. Like, well, why am I even here?
Right.
If I can't do nothing right, or if we can't come together, why you got me around?
Right. What's the purpose?
Right. We wasting each other's time. That's the trick of the enemy. Don't let it happen.
Right. Definitely. So hopefully, we appreciate you guys hitting those like buttons, hitting those hearts. We hope that you enjoyed this evening. Yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap that up, because unless you want to wave at it right past. But so hopefully we're gonna hit this again on our next time, and talk about how to manage conflict. But most of all, I want to encourage you that are in marriage, whether you've been married 1 year or 50 years, 100 years, 10 years, or whatever. We are definitely praying for you, and God is fighting for your marriage.
Absolutely.
He definitely is. And so don't give up. Don't let the enemy come in. And in this time when we are in this crazy 2020 COVID situation, all those things, don't let the enemy come in and destroy your team.
Absolutely. Draw the line. Draw the line, and be dutiful about protecting your relationship. There's so much that is going on in the world, that the enemy is always trying to break up and mess up infrastructure. And infrastructure really starts with the family and the home. And you don't want to allow that. So really be guarded, be present, pay attention. Somebody asked me some time ago, what would you tell your younger self, or if you on your wedding day, what would you say? And I said, I would tell myself to pay attention. Yeah.
And hopefully that you want to have a marriage that if you go back, I even put a question on Facebook, or if you went back to yourself, would you do it again?
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say that, thick or thin, I would always do it again. I would choose you over and over again. And you want a relationship that's like that. Unfortunately, some people, if they had a redo,
like, I wouldn't choose you.
Would not choose.
If I had a redo, I wouldn't choose you.
Right,
but
right.
That's terrible. Don't say that.
Right.
Definitely don't say that to your spouse. But yeah.
And because I remember hearing, because when God puts something together, no man takes it or pull it asunder.
What God has put together, no man can put asunder.
And that means not just outside of man. That means you,
right,
in the relationship. If God put you, don't pull it out. You
Absolutely.
Don't take it away.
Absolutely.
You don't mess it up.
Yeah.
Work at it. Don't create conflict. Manage conflict to resolve it.
Absolutely.
So that your team and that your partnership never stops.
Absolutely.
So, hey, God bless you, Crystal. We love you. We miss you. But also, Follow us on Instagram, Facebook. We're going to start doing a lot more things. Hopefully, enjoy our posts.
Yeah.
We'll start doing some other things, and we will see you guys. Won't see you next week. We will be out of town, unfortunately. But we'll be back. We'll probably do a replay of one of our messages. So this is if you have missed any of our messages over the past couple of years, look us up on WhatsApp video on YouTube. And you can follow everything. And then on our Facebook page, a lot of our chats on relationships have been up for the past few years. And then always follow us on Instagram.
Yeah.
So we appreciate it, and we will see you guys soon.
Absolutely. We are praying for you, and God is fighting for you.
God is fighting for you. God bless.
Good night.
And transition. We're trying to get out of here. There we go. Wrong button. All right. See you guys next week. Well, guys, we have to wrap it up this evening. We really hope that you've enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, this conversation has been amazing, and we want you to tune in again next time so that we can discuss more of these amazing topics and these topics of interest. Then don't forget to DM us, contact us, reach out to us, and we will definitely respond back.
If this has been Love in 60 Seconds, don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, good night, everybody.
60